Welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with Nathan Fox, founder of Fox LSAT, about the future of, wait for it, the LSAT. Your Law School Toolbox host today is Allison Monahan, and normally I'm here with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Career Conference, and I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact forum on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Nathan Fox, founder of Fox LSAT, about the future of the LSAT. So Nathan, I gotta say, when you first suggested this topic, I'll admit I was a little confused. I mean, hasn't the LSAT pretty much been the same forever since like the Stone Age? Are there actual changes that are really coming on the horizon?
Well, we think there's changes. There's some competition now. So I think the LSAT might be forced to change.
Competition from what?
Well, there's competition from the GRE. The latest news is that Harvard Law School in this next application cycle is going to start accepting the GRE for law school admissions.
Which is very interesting. I mean, I remember taking the GRE like back in the day. I think I was actually one of the first people to take it when they transitioned to computerized, which I think we'll touch on that regarding the LSAT later. I mean, and that was like ages ago. But why do you think the schools are doing this? Like, what's the benefit of allowing people to submit a GRE score and not have to do the LSAT?
Well, I mean, you know that law school application numbers have been in decline for the past, 10 years now almost, right? When I started law school 2008, we had kind of peak applications around that time. I think we're still looking at about 50% as many applications as were going in at that time. Law schools have had to shrink their class sizes in a lot of cases. Admission standards have been falling. Law school is just out of favor for probably a lot of very good reasons. We probably talked about that on last time I was on the show.
I think we've discussed that. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking like, well, is it really the worst? I mean, actually what I was just thinking when you're talking was, okay, so say I'm someone who can't decide what I want to do with my life. So I take the GRE because I'm like, well, then I can apply to a lot of different grad schools. And then suddenly this option to pops up to, apply to law school. I mean, is this really a good idea for anyone?
No. I mean, you should really only go to law school if you know what lawyers do and actually want to do that. Go ahead.
I kind of feel like if you can't be bothered to take the LSAT, like maybe you shouldn't be going to law school.
Yeah. I mean, so here's what I think about the Harvard thing. Harvard's only going to admit people that already have elite GRE scores.
Right.
So I don't think it makes much of a difference for people, except for people who are only going to apply to Harvard. Well, now Yale has followed suit. So now it's Harvard and Yale for this next application cycle that are going to be accepting the GRE. Maybe other schools will follow suit. For now, it really only affects people who basically already have an elite GRE score. Because I can see how, let's say, you had thought you were going to do a master's in public policy, or you were going to do a PhD in history or something like that. And then you realize, well, I'm never going to make any money at all as a PhD in history. So maybe, you might be like kind of on a path that is somewhat tangentially related to law, and you might actually be a reasonable candidate for law school. You've already got this elite GRE score. And now you want to go to Harvard Law, and Harvard Law would love to admit you based on your awesome grades, your awesome GRE score, and your otherwise amazing candidacy. But now Harvard is having to say, oh, go take this super obnoxious test.
Right. Go jump through this hoop, go spend some money, go spend some time, and then we'll look at your application.
Yeah. And well, I think that the problem here is that the LSAT is such a dinosaur. Okay. The LSAT is only offered 4 times a year. The LSAT is only offered on pencil and paper. It's only offered at their own special testing sites. And, it's just 20 years behind all the other major tests.
Right.
You can register for the GRE and take the GRE 3 weeks from now at any local testing center.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, I remember because I was one of the first people to do it on the computer, and that was part of the reason I did it. Was just like, well, I can get this out of the way. This just seems like so much easier than having to wait and go to some place and deal with all of that. I think at the time I was kind of nomadic. I was like, I don't even know where I'm going to be in 4 months. Like, how can I possibly sign up for a testing site?
Yeah, I mean, in 3 weeks, you can sign up and take the GRE and get your score immediately.
Yeah, you get it. I remember that because I thought I'd done really horribly on it.
It takes 3 weeks just to get your score back for the LSAT, even after you wait, 4 months to take the test. And it still takes 3 weeks to, like, in between the time where you sit for the LSAT and then you're waiting for your score to come back, you could also register for and take the GRE and get your score in that time.
Yeah. So, if somebody's making a snap decision and they want to go to law school, they don't have time to wait for the LSAT. Maybe this is the way to go to Yale.
Let's say I'm Harvard or Yale right now, and I don't have as many qualified applicants as I would like. And I have a choice, I've got this really otherwise premium applicant over here. They just haven't yet taken the LSAT. I can either wait for them to take the LSAT in June actually at this point we'd be in the entire next cycle.
Exactly.
They'd be taking it in June or September for the 2018 admission cycle. And instead they could say, hey, you've already got this awesome GRE score. You've already got these really great grades. We're not worried that you're not going to be successful in law school. Harvard and Yale don't really admit people that aren't going to be successful in law school. So why would we make you take this stupid test and jump through all these hoops?
No, it's a fair point. I mean, I'm pretty sure I got basically the same score on the GRE, percentage-wise, pretty much the same score on the GRE that I got on the LSAT. I don't think there was a drastic difference in my ability level. Like, you could have looked at either one of them and been like, yeah, you're good at standardized tests.
Yeah, for people who are really good at standardized tests, I've always been really good at standardized tests. So I crushed the GMAT, I crushed the GRE, I crushed the LSAT. It's like, for me, there's no difference. I'm going to score 99th percentile on any of those tests anytime. So I don't think for Harvard and the Harvards and Yales of the world, I don't think there's really any difference between the GRE and the LSAT. Right. I mean, they could accept the GMAT or they could accept the SAT. I don't know why they wouldn't, actually.
That's true. We all have the same SAT scores, basically, that we got on the LSAT. Yeah. It's like, right. I've been good at standardized testing since, like the 7th grade when they had us take the pre-SAT and did some like talent identification program. And they were like, wow, you did really well on this.
Yeah. That's a common thread for elite scorers. That's common. I mean, that's how it is for people who score really high. They can score really high on any of these tests.
Yeah. I never suffered through the GMAT, but, I'm sure I could do it if I had to.
You could do the GMAT in your sleep. I mean, the GMAT has basically easier verbal than the LSAT, way easier verbal than the LSAT. And then it also has like high school geometry, maybe like the easy parts of high school geometry.
Yeah, well, I went to a high school for science and math, so I'm sure that I could probably handle it if I needed to.
I'm pretty sure you can handle it.
All right. Well, I mean, if people are listening to this and they're trying to decide, like, should I take the LSAT? Should I take the GRE? I mean, I guess realistically, you basically still have to take the LSAT, right? You
do, and you might always have to take the LSAT because we don't know whether all other law schools are going to follow suit. Harvard is allegedly citing some study that shows that the GRE is just as good of predicting your law school performance as the LSAT, but they are not, I guess they're, for whatever reason, not releasing the details of that study. They're calling this a pilot program, and, it's going to take them then a couple years to demonstrate that these people were actually successful in law school.
Well, I mean, I have no doubt they'll be successful at Harvard or Yale. I mean, I think the bigger question is that every other school starts doing this. Is the LSAT possibly identifying some sort of characteristics that the GRE isn't? I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, the studies I've seen, there's not a whole lot of correlation between the LSAT score and like first year grades anyway.
Yeah, there is some.
There's
and
a
it
little.
Also correlates with bar passage rates. I mean, the big difference, I think, between the GRE and the LSAT is that the GRE has math on it.
Right, which is probably most people applying to law school are going to do worse on the GRE, even though the math is pretty easy.
Right. A big portion of your audience, and when I've mentioned this in my LSAT classes, I mention the GRE and people are really interested. Like, oh man, maybe I get to avoid taking the LSAT. I could just take the GRE instead.
I mean, it has a reputation, at least, for being easier.
The GRE does?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned then that the GRE has math on it, and then everyone in the room is like, "Oh, never mind."
Never mind. I'd rather do logic games. Thanks.
Yeah. They have a lot of them have a better chance on the LSAT than they do on the GRE, because the GRE is going to require you to dust off some of that high school or junior high algebra, and for a lot of people that ship has just sailed. I mean, they were never that great at it to begin with, and they have blocked it out, and they just do not want to be relearning like exponent rules and how to do factoring of polynomials and all that stuff, So, I mean, for a lot of people that's easy, but for a lot of people it's really, really difficult. So
yeah, I can definitely see how most people. I mean, even it's been a long time since I did that. I don't know. I guess I'd probably rather study again for the GRE.
Yeah,
but
I worry a bit about this if all schools follow suit. Which they very well might. I mean, especially if the LSAT doesn't adapt, and we should talk about that in a minute. But if all schools followed suit and started accepting GRE, I would worry because lower ranked schools are going to be accepting kind of mediocre scores, and a mediocre score on the GRE can be heavily weighted toward a solid math score. So it could be like a terrible verbal score, but a solid math score. I'm thinking specifically about international students now, English as a second language and international students. And
that's a great point.
It's just, because I got a post on my website. Actually, it was on the Thinking LSAT website. That's my podcast, by the way, the Thinking LSAT podcast. I got a post from someone who was saying, "Oh, hey, well, this is good for students who struggle with the verbal stuff, and this is a benefit for students who struggle with the verbal stuff." And I'm like, on the one hand, if getting into law school is actually good for you, then yes, this is good for you. But is law school actually good for you if you struggle with the English language? I mean,
yeah, it's like if you're struggling with the GRE level reading comprehension and things like that, you are going to sink in law school. Like it's going to be a very expensive, very time consuming mistake.
Law students and lawyers are gladiators who do battle using the English language.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that's just, I'm not trying to be elitist or anything, but you want to be very strong in reading and writing, or else in English, or else you're going to have a hard time competing in law school, and you're going to have a hard time passing the bar exam, and you're going to have a hard time being a lawyer. I mean, you need to be a verbal person, or else I don't know that a lawyer is really the best route for you.
Well, and you need to be not just verbal, but very comfortable reading and writing. I mean, that's what lawyers do.
Yeah, I know. It's shocking, but
like if FYI, if you think that you're going to do a lot of math and then do like prepared speeches, that's not what lawyers do.
Yeah, I mean, furthermore, if you're better at math and sciences, there's a whole realm of much more interesting careers out there that are available to you.
Right. I mean, that probably, you succeed in based on something other than how many hours you bill.
Go learn a scripting language.
Oh, God, please. I had someone come to me once. She was like a 2L, and she'd done horribly her first year. And she was like, should I drop out of law school? And so I went and met her, and I was like, yes. And so basically I asked her, like, well, what would you do if or is there anything you're thinking of possibly doing? And she says, well, I have been accepted to this coding program, and I'm really interested in that. And I'm a real introvert, so I think like maybe that would be a good job. And I'm like, yes, drop out of law school. Like nothing you're telling me makes sense for you to keep doing this. I mean, she kept doing it. She passed the bar or whatever. It's fine. But I was just like, yes, you are a person who probably should drop out of law school and go become a programmer. Like, please, you live in San Francisco. Like, do this.
Yeah, just unlimited opportunity for people with any kind of math and technical logic abilities like that. And if that's your strength, I mean, you got to go with your strengths. If you're struggling with the LSAT, and I just don't know why you then think you want to be a lawyer. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I mean, I could see the occasional person who's highly motivated by some particular thing they want to do. I really want to do like fighting for immigrants' rights or whatever. But you still have to get through law school and you still have to pass the bar. And if that's not realistic, you've got to be reasonable here.
Yeah, and you could help that cause by coding. I mean, for real, like those skills are so hard to come by and they're so expensive to purchase. And, you could make a great career for yourself with that skill and then also donate that skill in a lot of ways to make big differences. And I don't know. I just think there's too many people idealistically going to law school, like thinking they're going to change the world for immigrants. And, it's noble.
Exactly. It's a very noble.
Realistic it is.
Yeah, it's a very noble cause. But talk to me when you've got $200,000 in debt and you can't pass the bar about whether this is a really good idea.
Yeah. Now, what position are you in to change the world? I mean, you can't pay your rent.
It's not pretty. It's really not. So, yeah, I mean, the other thing I was thinking in terms of the GRE, I mean, so many more people take that even an average GRE score probably shows, frankly, less ability than an average LSAT score.
I would say so because of the math component. I haven't really looked at the GRE verbal recently. My sense is that it's going to be basically the verbal stuff is going to be easier than the LSAT verbal.
Well, especially just that you have, like, anyone who wants to apply to any type of graduate school basically has to take this unless they're applying to law or business or medicine. So,
right.
I mean, I went to architecture school and did a master's. And so all of those people had to take the GRE. Did most of them do very well on it? No, because they're not math people and they're not verbal people. They're designers.
Yeah.
And basically, Berkeley admitted me because I had really high GRE scores, even though I was essentially totally unqualified and incapable of design. But, I mean, these people are definitely, there are a lot of people bringing down the average on the GRE. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, there's people bringing down the average on the LSAT too, but...
Yeah, but I don't think there's many of them. I mean, think about all the different graduate schools you could be applying to, and all those people are taking the GRE.
Yeah, valid point.
Like, lots of people are going to really not so high-profile graduate schools.
True.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, so basically the schools, it seems, are really just doing this to get more applicants, maybe more interesting applicants, maybe people who are kind of, on the cusp of going to like philosophy graduate school, but decide they'd really rather be a legal academic instead. I mean, do you see any harm or benefit to the students who are here?
Oh, I see this as a benefit, purely as a benefit to the elite students who are going to be able to take advantage of this at Harvard and Yale. Right. I mean, this is just Harvard and Yale opening up the doors, making it a little bit easier to go to Harvard Law or go to Yale Law and not have to take 6 months to jump through the LSAT hurdle.
Isn't there some other school that did this first? I feel like I heard about this like 6 months or a year ago, like a not super elite school.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think there have been lower profile schools that have tried this on a pilot basis, but I'm not sure what the results of that are. I would be really worried about schools admitting people who are not that serious about law school. I mean, that is one thing about the LSAT is that it sort of limits the applicants to people who you have to be a minimum level of serious about law school specifically because you took this law school specific exam.
Right. And you studied for it, it
is a hoop, it's a big hoop. It takes a long time to jump through the hoop. It's expensive and takes a long time to jump through it. And so that in a way, and people, they just don't understand when I say this, but it protects you from getting ripped off.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's also, I feel like it's a signal. I mean, if you put in serious time and effort and you take the LSAT potentially more than once and you're still doing really poorly, that's a signal that law school is probably not the great choice for you.
100%. Yeah. If you've given it a good solid effort for 3 months or 6 months, if you've tried to get some help, if you've gotten some good resources, some good advice, you've really worked at it for a while, and you just can't achieve a score that's going to get you into a decent school and or at a decent price, then that's a very good signal that you should just not be on this path. And there's probably a million other things that you could excel at. And generally, I would encourage people to pursue things that they're going to be good at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
why not?
No, I mean, we work with a lot of students doing tutoring in school and also people who failed the bar exam. And one of the things we ask them about is, well, how was the LSAT for you? And a lot of people are like, oh, I really, really, really struggled with the LSAT. I took it 3 times. I had private tutoring. I could just never really get a decent score. And it's like, okay, well, what are you doing? Of course you're failing the bar, I mean, yeah. There's not quite that direct relationship. It's I'm not shocked to hear that you're struggling on the California bar exam. This was not a great fit for you to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I always have to put the caveat in there. If you score 145 on your first practice LSAT, I'm not worried about you because you could very easily improve that to a 160 or a 165. And now you're talking about a score that pretty solidly indicates that you've got a fighting chance on the bar exam, But I am really worried about the people who prep for 6 months, and the best LSAT score that they're ever able to achieve is a 145 or a 150 even. At that point, I'm pretty strongly in favor of you not going to law school because I'm worried how well you're going to compete against all these other people who scored 160 or 165. And I'm worried how you're going to compete on the bar exam. And it's just, that is probably a pretty good sign you should drop out.
And at least some of those people sat down and the first time they took it scored a 160. And the first time they take a law school exam, they're like, that wasn't that bad. Right. There are correlations here. I'm not saying they're perfect, but there definitely are correlations. And I completely agree with your point. You got to play to your strengths. Why struggle through something that's as difficult, time-consuming, expensive as law school when there's something else that you're actually better suited for that you could probably be up and running in a lot faster at a lot less cost? Why not do that?
Yeah. I mean, if you really do think that being a lawyer is the career for you, then it might be worth struggling through LSAT prep. But listen to that, pay attention to the progress you're making. And if 3 months later, 6 months later, you haven't made progress or you're not anywhere close to a score that's going to get you into the right school at the right price, then maybe you need to reevaluate and think about other opportunities out there.
Sure. Or if someone comes to you and they work with you one-on-one and you basically can't get them, any closer to their goals, well, you're pretty good at what you do. So, it might not be you.
I mean, I will do my best to try to talk people out of it. That's for sure.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
We do our best, but generally people don't listen. All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit from that depressing conversation. Sorry if anyone's sitting out there with a terrible LSAT score and they want to kill us right now. Well, maybe sit with that feeling for a little while.
There's lots more terrible feelings to come when you struggle in law school. When you're failing the law school exams or when you're failing the bar, those are worse. Those are worse feelings.
Yeah, so. You don't want to be that person thinking back to man, I heard on that podcast. I really should have listened to those guys.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what do we know about this? Up and coming digital LSAT. They're doing this pilot project. Tell me about this.
Well, I mean, shocker that this was announced immediately following Harvard's announcement that they were going to start accepting the GRE. So Harvard and Yale start accepting the GRE, and then immediately the LSAC starts tweeting about this new tablet pilot program.
Which, I've not really been able to find much information. I mean, do we have any idea, are they just giving the same questions in the same order on an iPad? Or is it more like the GRE where it's actually individualized depending on what you're getting right and wrong?
Okay, so no, we don't know. They are typically being very cagey. They do not like to release any information. I don't know why, but they just never tell anybody what they're really planning or what they're doing.
If there even is a plan.
Yeah, well, that's possible. Yeah. They are recruiting 1,000 LSAT students or LSAT hopefuls to sit for a tablet-based, which is, now this is strange that it's a tablet-based.
That's actually pretty weird.
LSAT. It's super weird, and it just, to me, I don't know, they've had a monopoly for so long on on law school admissions. The law school admissions test has been the LSAT for forever, and they're used to printing money. I mean, they really do. They just print money because they have to test prep providers like me. I have a license to reprint LSAT questions, and I have to pay them. I write these gigantic checks every year to the LSAC to use their licensed test questions. You also have to pay as a student. You pay $180 to take the LSAT. You pay $180 to take the LSAT again if you need to, and $180 again if you need to. And you just pay and pay and pay to the LSAC. And they've been printing money for decades now.
Right.
So I understand why they're reluctant to modernize. I understand why they're reluctant to make any changes. But now that they have this competition from the GRE, it seems as if they might get a little bit of a fire lit under them to
20 years later.
Yeah. Well, they have actually, we've talked about this on my podcast too, that they have actually been rumored and been kind of slowly piloting and doing these. It's just, there has been a digital LSAT, like they've been researching apparently a digital LSAT for like at least 10 years.
Oh, wow.
But so now they've gotten to the point where they're going to pilot it. It seems to me that it would be in the benefit of students to do just what the GRE and the GMAT and every other modern test has done and make the test available at all of these local testing centers.
Right.
Because they're in your neighborhood and you can easily schedule an exam anytime you want, and you just go sit down at the terminal, and then the terminals will just light up and say, GRE, bang, here you go, here's your GRE, and you immediately get your score. Well, that seems like that's not what the LSAC is doing. The LSAC is piloting now a version of the test that's going to be administered on tablets. I don't know if these are iPads or Surfaces or
probably whatever's cheaper.
Well, or maybe the LSAC is going to start selling tablets for $1,000.
Right, so they might have to make you bring your own.
God, yeah, we don't know. But it is happening in May. There are 20 test centers around the country. Unfortunately, there's none in like good places. So there's none in California. There's none in DC. There are all sorts of weird places like Norman, Oklahoma, where they're offering this pilot. But this is all on the website.
Yeah, and I think the deadline's already passed actually to sign up for this too.
Bummer. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they extended that deadline once, so it's possible to extend it again. But
maybe I was on there yesterday and it said that it was already over. So
that passed. Okay. Well. Yeah. That's too bad. But they're going to have 1,000 students sit for this thing at 20 testing centers across the country. So that's a pretty serious pilot. They're paying each of the people. They're going to give them $100 gift card. So they're talking about close to $100,000 probably that it's going to cost them at least, plus the tablets, plus the proctors. It seems as if they're pretty serious about moving in this direction.
Right. Well, I mean, it seems like it has to be inevitable.
It's got it. I mean, it's
just too ridiculous that you have to
way past time for this to happen.
No, I mean, it's not even. I remember when I took the LSAT, it was in this building where they were doing construction right outside with jackhammers. So it's not even like it was a great experience. That we have to protect the integrity of our experience on pencil and paper. It's like, no, that was a horrible test taking experience.
I think they are super cautious about people cheating on the test. They're also super cautious about protecting, probably even more so, they're super cautious about protecting their intellectual property. They really don't like these questions getting distributed because they want to be able to sell access to these questions.
Right.
So I think that's why they're going the in-house weird tablet route, because it's got to be something about security and licensing and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if it's literally just going to be the same questions or if they're going to get more fancy. I mean, it seems super weird to just have people like going through on a tablet instead of pencil and paper in the same room.
It's going to be, it is going to be real LSAT questions on this pilot. It's going to be actual LSAT questions. I don't know if it's from previous tests or what, but it's not going to be a change to the substance of the test. It's going to be real LSAT questions. They're going to give scratch paper, which will be necessary because for the logic games, you just really can't solve those games without drawing a picture.
Right.
So they're going to have to, on a tablet, you're not going to be able to make any pictures. So they're going to hand out scratch paper, which you're not allowed to have on the LSAT. For the regular LSAT, they don't give you scratch paper, but you can write on the test itself. Here, they're going to give you scratch paper so that you can draw pictures for the logic games. And then they say they're going to give feedback on your performance if you're signed up for this pilot, but it's not an official LSAT score. I don't even know if they're going to give you a 120 to 180 pseudo LSAT score, or if they're just going to give you some like report that shows which ones you got right or which ones you got wrong. We don't know yet what's going to come out of it. We also don't know, ideally, they would modernize the scoring. So you talked a little bit about the adaptive thing.
Right.
We call that computer adaptive testing. And the GMAT and the GRE are both computer adaptive, which means that they start you off with like an average difficulty question. And then based on your performance on that question, basically based on whether you get it right or wrong, if you get it right, they ask you a little bit harder question. And if you get it wrong, they ask you a little bit easier question. And they've found that they can, by this method, they can ask you less questions and more quickly determine your true level. If you get 1 through 5 right, then they've already started asking you some very difficult questions. And if you get those ones right too, then they're like, oh, well, we know that you're at least a whatever score.
Yeah.
Flip side, if you miss 1 through 5, now they're going to be asking you some of the easiest questions on the test. And if you're missing those too, then they have already a pretty good sense of what your score is. So the GMAT and the GRE have been like that for forever, for a decade at least.
More than that. It was like that. The GRE was like that when I took one of the first versions. I think it's probably gotten a little more sophisticated, but it was actually really disconcerting because I never practiced on the computer. I just did pencil and paper and then I showed up for it. And you could literally at that point tell if you'd just gotten a question wrong because it gave you like a much easier question after that. Yeah. So I was like, oh, and it's actually, but as you do better, you're getting harder and harder questions. And so you feel like you're doing worse. So I actually, had I not gotten my scores like immediately, I would definitely have canceled it. I was like, that was horrible. I did awful. And then I got them and I'm like, oh, I did really well. How is that possible? And then I realized, because I was getting hard questions because I was getting them right.
Yeah. There's different strategy involved on a computer adaptive test. Basically, you have to slow down even more and focus on getting all the questions in the beginning right. Because if you just get like 1 through 10 in a row right on one of those computer adaptive tests, even if you miss everything else for the rest of the test, you're just like still going to be there's a floor that's been built to your score at that point. We don't know whether the LSAT is going to actually become computer adaptive. I do think it's better for students because it makes the test shorter. Overall, this thing, if they do really modernize, the way that the test needs to be modernized is it needs to be, for one, it has to be offered more than 4 times a year. Right. Offering it 4 times a year is just so uncivilized. I'm talking to a woman the other day who, she's not sure she's going to be ready to take it in June. She really wants to go to law school next year. She's not sure if she's going to be ready to take it in June because that's only, less than 2 months to prep.
Right.
But she could take it in September, except her best friend's getting married on the day. And there's only 4 days a year that the LSAT is offered. And so now she's going to not have the September 2017 test as an option to her. And she's going to have to take it in December instead, which now puts her late in the application cycle. And it's just this whole dramatic, stressful mess because the test is only offered 4 times a year. Well, when the GMAT and the GRE are both offered continuously, that's obviously better for students, right?
Oh, for sure. Well, it just gives people much more flexibility. If somebody, say you had a stomach flu on the day that you took it and you did poorly, you can just immediately reschedule another one and take it again. You're prepped, you're ready to go. You just need to not be throwing up.
Yeah, but for the LSAT, if you're, let's say you were taking the February test, you get sick 1 week before the February test. Oh, well, sorry about that. Your next chance to take it's in the middle of June.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely crazy.
Just, no big deal. Just wait 4 or 5 more months and then you can have another crack at it. So sorry, you're going to have to continue studying for 4 or 5 more months.
Right. And, you may have to postpone your entire life for another year because you can't get this done.
Happens all the time. That happens all the time. So I think, this pressure now from the GRE is hopefully, I really do dearly hope that we'll get some modernization. But the test has moved in the past. The test has changed extremely slowly. I mean, the tests from 2003 are just so similar to the tests from 2017. So, and it's, still pencil and paper, still Scantron, still offered 4 times a year, still takes 3 weeks to get your score back. Nothing has changed.
I feel like it's a little bit like the bar exam. I mean, we're starting to see some changes there, but again, you can look at bar questions in most of these places from 15 years ago, and they're pretty much the same.
Well, a bunch of lawyers, they don't really do anything quickly.
No, definitely not. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, Nathan. Before we wrap up, let's just talk a little bit. Are you seeing any sort of trends among your students in terms of, people taking the test more times, fewer times? Are they getting better or worse scores? Do you see high scoring students getting extra money, even more than before? What's going on kind of on the ground with the LSAT?
Oh, just admission standards have dropped at almost every school. I'm seeing students getting into schools that would have been impossible 10 years ago, and now they're getting in even sometimes with scholarships. So it's definitely a buyer's market right now for a JD. The unfortunate side of that is that I think law schools are admitting more and more people who are going to struggle mightily with the California bar exam. So, that's the part that just...
Right. I mean, we see now the MBE scores for this year are horrific, and the bar passage rates at a lot of schools are horrific, not even just in California, which you kind of expect. But I mean, I think it was...
You hear these deans, I got a letter, the whole Hastings alumni community got a letter from the dean apologizing for UC Hastings' abysmal bar passage rate.
Which is terrible right now.
This last year. Well, it was 10 points lower than the state average, which is...
which is not good for... I mean,
that's just garbage.
Hastings should not be that bad of a school. They're not a school that should be 10 points under the state average.
It's not supposed to be. But... the letter goes on and on. It's making 2 arguments at once, which these 2 arguments are really not that compatible with each other. But it's making an argument that, well, we're gonna, we've already implemented all of these changes to our curriculum and we're going to make continuing changes to our curriculum and our academic support program, and we're going to identify people who are struggling, and we're going to do a better job preparing people for the bar. That's one argument. And then the other argument at the same time was ranting against the California Bar Association for making their exam. Okay. One, which is it? And 2,
I love it. It's it just shouldn't be as hard as it is. It's okay.
It was a crazy non-apology, right? Because it was an apology, but then it was also just blaming the Bar Association. Then the one thing that was, conspicuously missing from this 5,000 word email was no mention of being stricter with admission standards.
Right, exactly. Well,
that's the big problem. That's the elephant in the room here is, hey, guess what? You have been admitting candidates who are not as strong as they were 10 years ago. And now, shocker, your bar passage rate has plummeted.
Right. And I think the MBE stuff is definitely indicative of that. I mean, it's one thing to say these essays were extra hard this year or whatever, but it's no, the MBE really, I mean, okay, they added Civ Pro, but that's basically it. I don't think that really changed anything. Or not, not as much as the changes we're seeing, but it's the same thing. It's if you're good, if you do well in the LSAT, you're probably going to do pretty well in the MBE. If you do poorly on the LSAT, you're probably going to do poorly on the MBE. This is not rocket science.
No, it really shouldn't be. And when we're facing 50% decline in applicants, 50% decline in the number of LSATs administered, and a 50% haircut on applicants, but the schools have either admitted the same number of students or maybe slightly decreased the number of people that they're admitting every year. Well, of course, the admission standards have gone down, and you can look at the LSAT ranges and the GPA ranges at all of these different schools, and you can see where they were 10 years ago, and you can see where they are now. And of course, the lower quality of admitted student is going to lead to a lower bar passage rate. I mean, duh. That doesn't seem like a shocker. But of course, the schools aren't really excited to talk about that because they want to keep printing money as well.
Well, yeah, clearly. And, they're not really talking about what they're not doing either to prepare people, but that's a whole other conversation. All right, Nathan. Well, people, even after listening to this, some of them presumably have decided they're still going to sign up. They're going to take the paper LSAT. They're going to make it happen. How can they get in touch with you or find out more about what you do?
Yeah, that's my deal. I mean, if I can't talk you out of going to law school, then I will help you get into the best school you can at the best price you can. There's lots of ways you can get in touch with me. My website is foxlsat.com. It has information about my classes in San Francisco and Los Angeles and online. I do one-on-one private tutoring there as well. You can just go ahead and book a session directly through my website. You can call me anytime. I've always just used my phone number. It's in all my books and everything. So it's 415-518-0630. If you want to just reach out to me directly, you can even send me a text message.
Wow, that's brave.
No, hey, I can change the number someday if I start getting bombarded. But 10 years in the business, and I still, I love hearing from people. So yeah, please reach out. What else? Oh, Thinking LSAT podcast for sure. You can follow me on Twitter at nfox. I think that's probably enough.
I think that's great.
If they can't find me that way, then...
Right, and you also have books. Your books are on Amazon, I assume?
Tons of books on Amazon. I have a Logic Games playbook. I have a Logical Reasoning encyclopedia. If you look for Nathan Fox LSAT on Amazon, you'll find all that stuff. And there's links on my website as well.
So pretty much you're just a giant LSAT dork is what it comes down to.
I am a huge LSAT nerd. No one ever grows up wanting to be what I am, but as it turns out, it is the perfect fit for me.
Making it work. All right. Thanks, Nathan. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but it's been awesome having you on again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review or rating on iTunes or your favorite app because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. We typically release new episodes on Monday morning. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Allison, at lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. We'll put all the links to Nathan's info in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon, and good luck if you decide to take the LSAT.